Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Equifax Chief Data and Analytics Officer, Prasanna Dore.
Thank you. Welcome to our first customer conference. Man, I love it. What's next? I mean, it's great time to be in data and analytics. Every moment, as you saw, starts with a spark. Over the next 2 days, you'll hear from experts from data, analytics, machine learning, and much more. You'll also see some practical application of our patented innovation. More importantly, I hope you'll have the time to connect with your peers and leave here with sparks of your own. Before we start getting into data, analytics, machine learning, and all that detailed stuff, I want to take a step back. Take a step back and share a story of why what we do matters. Why what we do is so important. Every day we come to work with one goal in mind: to help people live their financial best. The story I want to share with you is my story. The reason I'm sharing my story is not because I'm Prasanna or some prima donna. It's because I'm typical of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. It's 1984. I decided to come to the US to study. I boarded a plane in Bangalore, India. After many connections and transfers, I finally land in Manhattan. No, not that Manhattan. Manhattan, Kansas. That's me, fresh off the boat. But for 2 years, I had no problems. I relied on my network of friends, families, and friends of friends to get through life. I loved it. I had no issue at all. In 1986, I graduated, summer of '86. I decided I want to go to New York to start my career. So as life happens, I thought it's a good idea to get a credit card. So I applied for one. Not only every bank rejected me, even retail stores rejected me to get a store card. I couldn't buy a cheap suit at JCPenney, let alone buying an air ticket to go to New York City. I mean, we Indians are a little frugal, and to get rejected by pennies, I carry that scar for the rest of my life. But man, I learned something. I was credit invisible. For the banks, I did not exist. And I knew that day it's going to have an impact on my life. But I'm a lucky guy. My roommate loaned his car to me to go to New York City. Midway to New York City, in Dayton, Ohio, my car catches fire in a parking lot of a diner. I still remember vividly. I go running back to the diner and say, I need water. And she gives me a glass of water. And I say no, and I show her the car. And she says, honey, you need something else. And there's a fire truck right there. I mean, that's not the spark I wanted, but it's a spark anyway, something that changed my mind. But just imagine, I was in Dayton, Ohio, middle of nowhere, no credit card. If I had one, I could have rented a car, bought a ticket, and gone to New York City. Again, I had to rely on my network of friends of friends. I ran into a friend of mine, a friend of a friend of mine, who is an insurance salesman. He took pity on this guy, drove me to a Greyhound bus station, loaned me $50 because my friend was a guarantor, and I reached New York City. Let's pause this for a second. I was lucky to have a friend who loaned his car. I was lucky to run into someone in Dayton, Ohio. Is luck or fate the only option for credit invisible? If the financial institutions knew that I had 2 years of stable income, 2 years of rental payments, 2 years of utility payments, 2 years of phone payments, they did not. They relied on one dimension of data, the credit data. I didn't have a credit file. I didn't have a credit score. Whether you're an immigrant or not, no one is born with a credit score. Have you ever seen a father looking at an ultrasound and say, oh my God, it's a beautiful girl, and she has a credit score of 800? No. No. There are 25 million people in this country who are credit invisible. 50% of the population in LATAM is credit invisible. 10% of the population, adult population in the UK, in Canada, Spain, are credit invisible. We should help, we can help, and we must help this team, this group. Let me transition back to my life again. Yeah, that's me again, shaved, in a cheap suit, looking like a traveling salesman. So I was in New York City, working for a boutique consulting firm. In a couple of months, and then, I decided to apply for a credit card again. I was like a dog with a bone. I wanted one. One financial institution took a chance on me. And I've been their customer lifetime. Thank you, American Express. Why did Amex take a chance on me while others did not? But for one, they had a different risk model. They wanted me to make sure that I pay the balances in full every time, every month. That helped me to start creating a credit file. Around the same time, when I moved into my penthouse in Manhattan, I applied for a personal loan to buy some furniture, clean the carpets. But I was turned down again. Why? Because I had only one trade line. One trade line was not good enough. It took me 4 years to move from a credit invisible to a thin file, but the impact was the same thing. The result was the same thing. So I had to rely on my network of friends to borrow some money to buy this ugly couch. By 1994, I finally got my first mortgage to buy my home, the first home in Wilton, Connecticut. It took me 10 years, guys, 10 years to go from credit invisible to a thick file. And that's too long. That's too long. There are 65 million people in this country alone that are thin files. Again, we must help them, and we can help them. But how? How can we help them? I want to discuss or talk about my favorite concept in economics: information asymmetry. What is information asymmetry? Whenever there's an imbalance of information between, say, a lender and a borrower, or a buyer and a seller, this imbalance of information is information asymmetry. That information asymmetry impacts everyone: the buyer, the seller, the lender, the borrowers. Take me for an example. When I was at Kansas State, the banks didn't know that I had a stable income. The banks didn't know I paid my rents on time. And that imbalance is information asymmetry. Just imagine if the banks had that information, how my life could have been changed. But today, you don't have to imagine it. Today, we have more relevant data than ever before. We have technology and analytics that can really create a 360-degree view of a consumer. Let me sort of get a little more detail into how do we really minimize this information asymmetry, the imbalance of information. There are three pieces to the puzzle to reduce information asymmetry, the imbalance. First is data. Second, analytics. Third, identity. These are the three pieces of the puzzle to reduce information asymmetry. Let me start with data. You heard all the statistics that the last 5 years or 4 years, 90% of the data was created in the last 3-4 years. We at Equifax, we've been amassing, collecting huge amounts of data. Our data strategy globally is based on three pillars. Three pillars. We have one exchange, the credit exchange. We have another pillar, which is the utility exchange. Then you have another pillar, the income exchange. Then what we have done is we have built supplemental exchanges around all this. And this is our data strategy of Equifax. In US alone, our utility database, utility database, we have cell phone payments for 200 million people, utility payments, income. We have 100 people in the income database. We know not only their income, their tenure, and a lot more. I mean, I'm a data nerd. When I look at this, I salivate. I mean, this is an incredible kind of assets that we have. And the second piece of the puzzle I said was analytics. As we all know, data is like crude oil. We need to refine it. Analytics is a refinery. For the last 30 years, we've all been using techniques like simple regression, logistic regression. We know all the pitfalls of that. I don't want to go into it. But Equifax, we've been using now artificial intelligence, machine learning to understand credit behavior. Not only to predict credit behavior, what we have done is we can even explain the decisions that we make out of that AI and machine learning. And that decision making is what we call explainable AI. Just last December, we got a patent. I believe it's one of the first company to get that in this space, a patent for explainable AI. It's called NDT, Neuro Decision Technology. I'm so proud of the team that's done it. This is a game changer, guys. This is a game changer. The third piece of the puzzle, identity. Given all that's happening, everything is mobile, everything's electronic. I want to share with you a case of mistaken identity, mine identity. Early 1990s, I was at Dreyfus. Mellon bought Dreyfus. I was one of the lucky ones who still have a job. They asked me to go to Pittsburgh to talk about, at that time, what was called database marketing. So I'm here in a similar kind of a format. I'm talking about database marketing. And there's a guy in front of me looking at me as if I was from Mars. And after a little while, I feel a little uncomfortable, and then I look at him and say, I know this is Pittsburgh, but I'm sure you've seen an Indian before. And the guy gets up and says, oh, sorry, I never realized persona was a name of a person. I thought persona was an acronym for a database marketing system. I was a computer. And my wife has called me many names, but she's never called me a computer. But that's the point, identity is very, very important, and it has to be frictionless. So we have sessions that talks about, identity, fraud, and I encourage you guys to go, attend those sessions. Again, to close this section on information asymmetry, data, analytics, identity are the three pieces of the puzzle that help us do that. When I started, I said our goal is to really help people live their financial best. 90 million people are either credit invisible or thin files. They all look like me. May not be like me, but you know what I mean, right? We need to help them. Just last week, I asked the team to go back and do some analysis on the 90 million people and come back with some numbers. 46%, almost 40 million, 46% of 90 million can be categorized prime or near prime. Just imagine that. Out of 90 million, almost 46%, 41 million names, are either prime or subprime behavior. What we can do to them, and also what's good for your bottom line too. In 1984, you guys couldn't help me. But today, if this guy shows up, let's make sure if he goes to Dayton, Ohio, we give him a credit card. Thank you.